Good afternoon to everyone. I hope that everyone is doing well wherever they are, considering these times that we are in. I am super excited that all of you have joined us for Black Feminist Future's political education series, Hone. Again, you could be anywhere, you could be doing anything, but you are here with us, and this will be recorded so you will be able to share with your people. I want to share a little bit about Hone, about Black Feminist Future, me, and our guest. So, about Hone. This is our quarterly political education series designed to sharpen and build the Black feminist analysis of the people. At a time of constant attacks and information overload, I know I'm overloaded. Hone exists to be an exploratory space to deepen, develop, and prime our critical minds to shape critical action. Hone is open to anyone looking to sharpen their Black feminist analysis. And this quarterly online series will host Black feminist scholars, organizers, creatives, and beyond to explore key aspects of our shifting world. Each quarter, we will bring you these thinkers and doers to be in conversation with me, the founder and head rabble-rouser here at Black Feminist Future, Paris Hatcher, and how we can get a sense of the issues and topics and challenges that are important for us to better understand at these times. And we will also provide you with resources afterwards so that you can continue to hone and sharpen on your own time, because we know that political study is ever present and ever important. I want to share a little bit about the organization that's bringing to you this series. In our 11th year, Black Feminist Future is a national membership-centered organization with over 1,300 members across the US and the diaspora. To learn more about us, how to build power with us, to become a member, I invite you to join blackfeministfuture.org. Also, this June in New Orleans, we are hosting the largest gathering of Black feminist thinkers, doers, rabble-rousers in the US at Get Free, a Black feminist reunion. This will be what our second quarterly offering of Hone will be. It will be in person at Get Free. So register to join us and to be fortified in New Orleans. You can visit to learn more information at blackfeministreunion.com. And about me, I'm Paris Hatcher. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I have the privilege of being the founder and executive director at Black Feminist Future. This organization is truly important at this time, and I'm excited to be in conversation with two incredible Black feminist leaders who will help us understand the question of this first Hone conversation. What time is it on the clock of the world? This question, what time is it on the clock of the world, was inspired by Black organizers, in particular, Asian American organizer Grace Lee Boggs and Jimmy Boggs. The question answered in the 60s and ever since is ever relevant today. What is the time? Whose clock are we talking about? How are we making sense of the time, our collective conditions, in a moment of consistent shock and awe, of devastation, of just downright stupidity at times? How could there have been so many people who wanted this path and so many of us who don't want this path? How do we take action? How do we not get overwhelmed? All the questions helping us, figure out this question: what time is it on the clock? Let us make sense of it. What are our political conditions? So to help us take a stab at answering this question, I've invited Dr. Cathy Cohen and Ashley Henderson to be in conversation with me this evening. A little bit about our incredible guest. Dr. Cathy Cohen is a scholar and activist focused on race, gender, and politics. A professor at the University of Chicago, she founded the Gen Forward survey, highlighting young adults' political views. Her work promotes equity by examining the intersections of race, class, and sexuality. Welcome, Cathy. And Ashley Woodard Henderson. Ashley is a Black activist and leader in so many incredible spaces, whether it be the Working Families Party, one of the founders and co-creators of the Movement for Black Lives. If there is a beautiful coming together of people, Ashley is typically there. Has been organizing around racial justice, workers' rights, the environment, and democracy, and also other projects around governance, which I hope to hear more about. So welcome, Ashley. Thank you for joining us. So let's jump in. And in particular, I want to let the folks who are joining us, and more folks are starting to join us, know how to interact with us during this time. So I'm going to be asking Cathy and Ashley some questions. There will be an opportunity to do some Q&A. And of course, you know, the chat is open and we invite you to be in dialogue with each other. As I mentioned, we hope to finish this with some calls to action, in particular, calls to study, calls to do some more honing. So we'll be able to share the resource list with you. And with that, let's get going, y'all. Y'all ready? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, you want to start with Ashley first? So I want y'all to tell us a little bit about yourself. I gave a little bit of a start, a lead in. And what time is it on the clock of your world today?
I love this question. What time is it on the clock of my world? It's like prime time. It's go time. It's doing time. Both because we have this excellent opportunity provided us by BFF to be in a shared learning environment where we're all teaching and learning from one another, which I'm so hyped about. I feel like in this season, you know, despite the absence of a lot of folks giving clearly defining and operationalizing strategies, that one of the best things that we could be doing to fill the vacuum that we're creating in the absence of strategy is getting sharp politically, sharp in our analysis, sharp in our ability to assess the conditions and name what time it is on the clock of the world. So it's go time. And that for some of us might mean training up and studying and getting ready to figure out the ways that we can best use our skills for the sake of what I desire, a revolutionary change of the economy and the social reckoning in our country. I'm every time I hear this question, and I'd only think about all of my elders and ancestors who would stay up till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning debating about this question. But I also think of some contemporaries of ours, Paris, like Inse Ufai, who offered in response to a SNCC veteran, a Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee veteran, asking us this question, said, it's about as dark as it can get for some of our communities. Like people are suffering, people are dying, people are being targeted and attacked. Folks are getting away with violation of not only just like basic civil rights in our social contract, but just immoral, evil things. And that would be devastating if that was the end of the story. But friends, I'm excited. It's an exciting time for me because the benefit of it being as dark as it can get is that the sun could come out if we so chose to help make it so. And I feel excited about that because I think in a moment like this where contradictions are very, very high, contradictions meaning there are multiple things that are true at the same time, that things are really bad, but things could be really good very quickly if we made it so, is that now is a time where we could be actually fighting for, demanding, and building what we've always deserved instead of just capitulating to what we would concede to. That now, as the MAGA forces are trying to destroy democracy, and successfully so, I would say, are destroying the government as we've known it, or trying to destroy the economy as we know it, to make minority rule over the masses of us who are actually more socially, politically aligned with one another than we are with these billionaire bros, that we actually could let them kill this thing and build what we actually want. The challenge is we can't do what time it is on the clock of the world to me is that we can't be escalationist. We can't be rushing to the disaster of it all if we don't have a plan to keep as many people as possible safe. Because what we know as Black feminists, and I would say for me as a Black queer feminist, that we know that we'll be disproportionately impacted by what happens in the fallout, both in terms of the negative impact and the expectation to save everybody, which I'm sure we'll talk about before this call is up. So I do think it's really dark. I think that is true, but I think the contradiction to that is that it could be a moment of great opportunity. I hear Septima Clark in my head talking about how chaos can create opportunities for great creativity. And if we played our cards right, we actually could see an ushering in of an economic system and a governance system that actually is rooted in our values. But it's going to require us to actually get to the doing to make that so.
Wow.
Cathy, get in here. Yes,
I
I
know, I know.
love
This
that.
that's why I wanted Ash to go first. It was like all I have to do is go, yeah, absolutely. I'll say a little more than yeah, but I'll start with, I want to thank Black Feminist Future for bringing us together. Like Ash said, I mean, for me, this is an opportunity to be in conversation, to learn, to hone, to sharpen. And so I think we give some sense of how we are thinking about the world. It doesn't mean that it is right. And we have an opportunity to kind of go back and forth and think about how to make all of us better, right, in terms of our analysis, but also, I think, as Ash pointed to, this moment of doing. One of the questions you asked, Paris, was who are we? So I just want to say one word, which is I'm a Black lesbian feminist. And I say lesbian because I want to claim that word. I feel like there is erasure around who stands as Black lesbian. I'm old enough to like, that's how I was brought up. That's where I got my political chops as a feminist. It was a Black lesbian feminist, right? So I just want to hold on to that. The other thing I want to say, and I could say a lot more. I think, I am from a working class background in Toledo, Ohio, where my people struggle. They have dealt with systems of oppression all of their lives, and they have, in multiple ways, always tried to resist. That's what I was brought up with. I was brought up to love Black people from my mother and father and my community, to be always in service to the liberation of Black people. And for me, that is a constant about kind of what time it is. But if we go back to thinking about kind of how the Boggs raised this idea, it was also to say, in many ways, to give us, I would argue, some humbleness about our impact, right? To say that, in fact, if we think about kind of world history as a clock, where every 50 years is a minute, right? We think of our lives as expansive, but really we are in touch with and building on the work of our ancestors and building a path for our children and folks who are going to come after us. And so what is the work we need to do at this moment, right? Um, and I think Ash is right. I wrote down some things, so I'm going to be looking down because Ash is bringing knowledge. So I'm like, okay, what do I want to say about this? I I I think it is a dangerous, dangerous time for us. Now, when we get to the part about what you're reading, I will say I'm reading a book about kind of the long history of anti-fascist struggle in Black communities. And to say that while it may not have been defined as fascism, there is a long history of Black people's humanity being dismissed, right? The things that we need being withheld, any sense of kind of democratic rights being ignored. So I do want us to pay attention to the kind of desperate and dangerous moment we're in, but not to diminish the fact that we have always been in this struggle. And this is a new, we might even say, formation of anti-Blackness and racial capitalism against, not just against Black people. And I think this is the other thing that we want to be paying attention to, right? So we want to be paying attention to, yes, the ascent of Trump as an authoritarian fascist leader, but also to think about, as Black feminism would tell us, the kind of systems that have led to this moment, whether starting with neoliberalism, the kind of dismantling of anything some people would call a safety net, right? We can think about kind of essential workers and what happened to Black people under COVID, right? So to have a long view, but also I think, as Ash noted, to have a clear sense of the importance of this moment and our need to move. Last thing I'm going to say, and I'm sure we're going to get to this, is to talk about kind of what is it going to take to move? Because I was in a conversation recently and someone said something that I thought was right, which is I'm not sure we have the legitimacy of Black people anymore, right? That and to move means to be in community, to prove ourselves worthy, to build solidarity, to be relevant. I'm going to say to be relevant, and then we can think about moving, right? So it just feels like there's a lot of work we need to do, but all work that we can do. That, yeah, I'll stop there.
Oh, what a juicy beginning. I think what both of you lifted, I think are really just, there's so much, I love it. It's not, I mean, I love it because it's insightful, not because of what we're facing, but we are in dangerous times. We are in dark times, but we cannot give up, right? Because we come from people who never gave up. That would be just so disrespectful from what we've come from. I think what you have offered around, we have an opportunity in this chaos, Ash, to really craft something. But I think, Cathy, what you are offering is something that I'm often in conversation with either the folks at BFF and other folks, that we cannot be so ahead or beyond Black folks that we begin to believe that who are we doing this for, right? If our work, our legitimacy, if our relevancy is only seen for the few and not the all. And I do think that in this moment, it could be really deceptively easy to get lured into that, right? To getting more super niche, super niche, super niche, when in my heart, I know, in my Black lesbian heart, because there's still some of us left, Cathy, um, really, what does it take to build mass, in particular, build mass with Black folks? So with that in mind, I would love for y'all, we're going to be using some definitions that I think, or words that oftentimes need some defining. So would you mind giving a definition, and maybe Cathy, you could, or Ash, whoever wants to, what are political conditions? When we say that in our work, or when we say we want people to make an assessment, what are we asking people to be able to do? And how should people understand political conditions? Who would like to take a stab at that?
I I I I mean, I'll be quick on mine, right? There are, I think, different ways of understanding definitions of political conditions. It can be the things that we face, the systems that we must encounter, the political formations that shape our opportunities, and the kind of resistance on the part of the state. Um, I'm trying to think of a better way to say this. If we think about kind of, and to think about the political conditions as really differing from, for example, the federal to the state. I live in Chicago. Here's maybe a better way to think about it. I understand the national government, the federal government, as being on the attack against, I would say, poor working class, and in particular, Black people, right? And in some cases, really also the Black middle class. When we think about the kind of attack on the federal government, that has been one of the most consistent forms of at least economic mobility for Black people historically, right? Which is an employment in the federal government. And there's been very little talk about what this kind of slash and burn from Doge or whatever the fuck, whatever it is, how it's impacting Black people and the stability in our communities in terms of economic. At the same time that the political conditions at the federal level suggest that in fact we are dealing, and those aren't just the reasons that we're dealing with a fascist state. I live in the state of Illinois, which people would consider a quote unquote blue state, which is complicated because in fact it has a center, Chicago, and then it has a lot of rural areas, right? And then I live in a progressive, on a good day, leftist city in the city of Chicago that also I think the political tendency would be to support most communities that are marginalized, in particular Black communities, but because of its relationship to a state and the federal government, may not have the resources to do the work that we want to do, right? So for me, the political conditions are always in flux, right? They are the kind of larger environment that shape how we experience the world and how we're able to act. The last thing I'll say on this, political scientists and social movement theorists talk about it as a political opportunity structure, which shapes the opportunity for movements to emerge and how long they emerge, right? What does the kind of target look like? How much repression are you going to face? What is the ability to kind of come together and build? Those are the things that kind of shape the conditions under which we do our politics and the ways in which we live our lives. And I would say those are kind of the political conditions. Ash, I'm sure you got a much more succinct. Give it to
I
me.
mean, only because you've said it so well. I mean, y'all, for folks that know me in a previous life, I was an English major. So like I believe words really do have meaning. And I think that what the fancy folks would say is the denotation of political conditions. Cathy just knocked it out of the park, like what the word actually means. I feel like we use it really liberally, like we apply it to a whole bunch of things, um, including, and the only thing I would add is like the mood and opinions of people in any given any moment, right? And sometimes it's very anecdotal, and I'm just gonna be honest because it's late in the hour and my sensor is on E. That many of the folks who scream the loudest about what the political conditions are haven't actually talked to their neighbors in decades, right? That actually your way, the only way, in my opinion, to know the actual political conditions of a community is to be embedded and amongst that said community. So I can't come to you and talk to you about the political conditions of Black people if I don't talk to Black people. I can't tell you the political conditions of the working class if I only spend every waking moment talking to people either, you know, in the ivory towers that I've come from, or philanthropy, or you know, frankly, the activist and organizer professional class. That is not to finger wag at us. We're doing the best we can with the conditions we've been served. But I just want to be really super duper clear that when I'm talking about, you know, you'll hear people say the word conjuncture.
Mm.
And when I'm talking about the conjuncture, which is essentially an assessment of the economic, political, and social climate of a place in a particular time period, I'm really trying to get to the heart of the masses, not just my assessment as a particularly privileged, but also marginalized and from a targeted and marginalized community. So for me, when I think about what we need to do to be better able, to the second part of your question, Paris, like how can we better be able to assess the political conditions? We got to start talking to people again. We like, I don't know how you can organize and call yourself an organizer. Organizers are doers. It's a doing thing, right? I can't call someone my lover if we aren't actively loving each other. In the same way that I cannot call myself someone's lover if I'm not actively loving them, doing the work of love, then I cannot call myself an organizer if I'm not actively doing the work of bringing communities together across their differences to take collective action toward a shared strategic goal. And the best way to get an assessment of the political conditions of those people is to be with them. We got to get back to organizing where we talk to people again. And I think that's really critical because I feel like we actually have done a piss poor job, if I'm being frank, of actually assessing the political like mood and climate, and conditions of Black and working class people. I think to Paris's point, I think far too many of us think we know what's better for them than they know for themselves. When actually what we're seeing from the actual data that is coming from people who are actually talking to our folks is they are ready, They are even aligned potentially with our values and our big utopian dreams and visions, but they don't believe that we can do it. Right.
Yep.
And Black people will do one of two things. Any marginalized and targeted community will do one of two things in these moments of crisis. They will either lean into the revolutionary spirit that they've got. Well, it's really even more than two things, but they'll be motivated and get in the streets with us, take up the work of getting on calls like this and organizing their people to take collective action. They'll call their senators, right? They'll do those things, or they'll become more conservative in an attempt to protect themselves, right? And so I think we also just, if we're talking about the political climate, got to get really honest that Black people, as much as we say it as a good soundbite and tweetable moment, Black people are not monolithic. And in this period, we've really got to get sharper at building the kind of trust where we can get a stronger hold on the political climate, not just to be smarter people, but to actually implement sound strategy.
Okay, can I just jump in
Yeah,
really?
go ahead. Yep,
I'm
jump
sorry,
in.
Paris, because I think Ash is absolutely right. Well, first of all, I think there is a difference between understanding, and I think people do it all the time, the complicated nature of political conditions that really do vary, and how I feel like I'm living my life, right? It was the difference between people, they kept telling us, oh, the economy's great, and people feeling like, hell, I can't buy eggs. Like, there was a disconnect. And so if you weren't talking to people and just looked at the data, then you were making a mistake. Now, I'm going to say to all the people who are online who aren't organizers per se, there are other ways, right, that we can contribute to movement space about understanding how people exist. I'm hopefully an activist and all that, but I'm also an academic. And part of what we do is we do surveys to be real about where Black people are. I think sometimes we lean into the kind of revolutionary nature of Black people and leave back the conservative hesitation of Black people. And if we aren't clear on where folks are, it's not to say that that's where they will be forever, but that's where we have to meet them to move to them and us somewhere else. And so I do think that we all have to be thinking about, how do I talk to my neighbors? How do I use data? How do I support an infrastructure of organizing that is informed, where campaigns are relevant and meeting people where they are as we move somewhere else? And I do want to say, I think that's critically important.
It is important. I think that it can be really easy to romanticize us, our people, right? And I like to just do some level setting where it's a reality, not because it's not a judgment, but all of us believe that we would have been Harriet, but in her time, there were very few Harriets, right? The reality is that the conditions of enslavement meant that the fear and pressing threat and danger of everything meant that most people were trying to survive, not escape. I share that again without judgment for my people, because I'm here because of my people. But we cannot romanticize and just believe, yes, that the revolutionary spirit will just happen. In fact, the worst of times does create a retrenchment, I think, but a lot of people, because out of fear, right? We are animal nature of protection. I'm afraid, I don't know what to do. And so we have to fight the desire to romanticize and be clear-eyed about where we are. And I think that really tees up this question around, let's talk about the election a bit. In particular, there are some that I have been listening, some political scientists that have said that the data from past elections or even the platform from previous presidents give a great indication of how we ended up in the moment that we're in now, that it wasn't as surprising as many would say. Now, I can say this honestly for myself. I had an idea it was going to get bad. I didn't know it was going to get this bad this quick, right? I mean, it's escalating at a I knew it was going to be bad, but as fast as it's been escalating. So I'm curious if, looking back at the election and talking about it and understanding if past is prologue, had there been any indication that this is where we were going to be ending up? And who wants to take that first?
You want me to take it, Cathy? Yeah. So I think the very simple answer is yes. Yes, there was lots of evidence to say this was coming. I've told beloveds that if I think about it too long, I'll get so pissed off I'll be ineffective. So I've been really quickly skimming over the many I told you so's that I think particularly Black lesbians and Black queer folks who tried to warn, and Black movement elders of all stripes have tried to warn us that this was coming. But I'll give a couple of examples. And I as a political educator and as a community organizer, I really think it's important to leave you breadcrumbs for your continued study. I am by no means an expert on this. I just became obsessed in the 2010s about it because I was seeing what was happening with the Tea Party movement. It was a very obvious attempt by this interesting consolidation of forces of white people that don't traditionally get along, just to be honest, right? And I say white people, and I mean that even though MAGA is a multiracial movement, the Tea Party really was starting to spread seeds that led to that. So I'm starting with the white folks that had that idea on purpose, because it was primarily white dudes and their wives, their MAGA wives, the Moms for Liberty types, who were thinking, how can we come together across our differences to be ready to govern, and not just in a way that gives us some tangential power, and gives us some minimal increase in our ability to consolidate our wealth, but that actually proves to people that government doesn't work and allows us to actually put in some strong men that can literally do minority rule, right? Like to build this sort of this broligarchy, right? So essentially what happened was these Christian nationalists who wanted to, get back to the nuclear family and get rid of these scary, dangerous homosexuals and define genders as really two binary things, uh, and and frankly, evangelicals who believe that doing these things will usher in the return of Jesus Christ, were like, we're in, right? We're in if we get these things by law, right? And we want more of a Christian-centered government, right? People are like, okay, cool. Then you've got like explicit white nationalists, which not all the Christian nationalists were, right? Like some of them were like de facto racist, but weren't like actively trying to build a white nation. They're like, we're a melting pot. We just want the melting pot to be Christian dominated. These white nationalists were like, no, like we could be cool with y'all getting that, but only for the sake of building white nuclear families that basically get to control, again, a minority rule sort of scenario in the United States, especially because they were having an existential crisis, y'all. Guess why? If you know why, I want you to put it in the chat. Hint, what's happening with the Black nation and the brown nation and indigenous folks? Our numbers are going up, right? Which means what for white nationalists? An existential crisis. What happens to us if we are the minority, right? Right. White birth rates are down, y'all. So what does that mean for them? They are in an existential crisis. So they are trying to create a government that literally prioritizes them being able to keep their wealth and power while also trying to flip the world back upside down so that white people become again the majority governance body in this country, knowing that in the very near future, they will be a numerical minority, right? And then last but certainly not least, and again, this is like way fast and way too generalized, but the third major faction inside of this that has been again growing for quite some time now is this tech broligarchy, right? This billionaire class crew of white boys and their like colored friends who have billions with a B of dollars that they are extracting from people who look and live and love like us, for the sake of building sort of a technocratic government that they can get contracts from that continue to expand their wealth, but also because many of them see that this earth is finite, that they can build enough wealth to get the hell out of here when they need to, right? And when I say get out of here, I mean literally leave the planet, right? I know it sounds wild and like a sci-fi movie, but it is very literally true. That's why Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk are actively in a fight around space travel, right? So you've got these three different factions of folks that for the last several decades have been trying to figure out how they could put their pieces together. And there's a whole lot more, but and there's sub factions inside those factions, right? But those three major factions are currently vying now for the attention of Donald Trump. And when I get the most angry about it, Paris and Cathy, it is because we told y'all the game plan. Project 2025 has been a project that is not new. It, came from the mandate for leadership from Reagan. We knew that the Heritage Foundation and many other right-wing think tanks and philanthropists were throwing, like literally spending down to take over the status quo. They weren't just trying to get the government. They were literally trying to make these right-wing, these far right-wing political ideologies, these beliefs, these values, the mainstream, right? And they are relatively successfully doing that. And while we are prioritizing communicating with the few, calling it the masses, about our values, they are actively telling people lies about fixing the problems that they've got, and they're talking about how they'll fix them in ways that just aren't true, that actually won't fix that if anything exacerbate the problem, right? So I think we've got not only a history that got us here that is MAGA specific, but I also just would encourage people, and again, a lot of this will be in the resources, that there were actually previous movements of white nationalists, of Christian nationalists, of authoritarians, folks that were US citizens, but were supporters of the Nazi Party in Germany, and many, many others who have attempted to do very similar takeovers of the courts, of the legislative branch, and of the executive branch of the federal government. So this also isn't the first time this has happened in the United States, but this is the first time that they have been able to consolidate so quickly. And part of the reason they were able to consolidate so quickly is because they had a plan, they had a vision, they had a mission, they had a shared strategic orientation, and they had a multi-tactical strategy that allowed for them to very swiftly move in. And the last thing I'll say on that is part of my frustration at our surprise at the shock and awe of this moment is because, again, that part wasn't a secret either. All of this has been in Project 2025. Myself and Jairus Dixon and several other incredible folks, including like Linda Burnham and others, put together a Fascism 101 series last year in an attempt to try to get us prepared for this blowback that we were going to see. And frankly, with the movements that we've built over the last decade and certainly 50 to 100 years of Black power building and Black feminist movement building, we should have expected to be here. We should have expected that the far right was going to say absolutely not. And in the last dying breath before their ways of being were obliterated, we're going to throw every freaking thing they've got at us. And this is that moment. And now we're in a point of choice. We can let that happen and complain about how we got here, or develop movement strategies for the movement we wish we had instead of the one that we've got right now. Or we could be strategic and we could actually be non-compliant while blocking MAGA, while building the sort of governance structures that we've always deserved. I think that's what we ought to be doing.
Yes, there's so much there, and in particular, the block and build strategy. I know that Maurice Mitchell mentions that. Many folks are talking about this, and I agree. I think our movements, and this is for another time, are a bit of a shambles of last year because we wanted to block, to build, and there was a lot of, there was a lot of impact around the ways that we thought that we could block. And, that's a C4 conversation perhaps, but I think y'all know what I'm alluding to, because we are now living in a reality that actually I don't even think that the left we've never reckoned with. And two, I don't think there is a shared assessment that the blocking there's still people saying that was still the wrong block. So, Cathy, I'm gonna invite you into.
I know. I want you to say more, but because I don't necessarily know if that's a C4 conversation, right? To say
Okay, okay,
about,
For the purposes of information.
yeah.
okay. I don't think it is either. I think just for myself, BFF as a multi-entity organization definitely was in a very difficult place. But our members backed our decision, our C4 decision. But the blowback was not without a tremendous consequence, and maybe one that we're still dealing with today. And I think that in this idea of blocking and building and imagining, the impact of the elections, the things that we could see, what do we think is possible? Ash, you did say something that the right at times, again, they have many factions, but are able, it seems like, I'm not inside of them, to
Yeah.
coalesce
Yep.
and to move together.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
and then they blow up.
yeah,
Like I'm not saying
Yeah,
they are not.
exactly.
Trust me, they are
Yeah.
not innovative. They are
That's
not
right.
particularly creative.
Right.
Think about like y'all remember the Tiki Torch March in Charlottesville?
Yeah.
Y'all remember that, right? There were secular organizations, there were Christian nationalist organizations. There were like y'all know Nazis are socialists, at least in name, right? So there were socialists and there were capitalists, right? There were all sorts of different kinds of like gross, nasty, hateful stew at that march. They tried to do the same thing where they came together across their differences, made a big bang, right? Y'all know that was in response to a reparations package in Charlottesville. We don't have enough time to get into it, but it was about Black people getting reparations. After that happened, they tried to do it again in Tennessee. They got wiped off the face of the map in our state, in my great state. But part of the reason that was able to happen is because of the infighting that they were already doing, right? And again, like if we look at what's happening with MAGA on the federal level, Steve Bannon hates Elon Musk,
Absolutely.
right? These evangelicals can't stand Steve Bannon, right? So
But they love white supremacy more.
100%. What they will do to defend white supremacist patriarchy knows no bounds.
That's
Now,
it.
their ability to stay, to not fragment is the same fight we're in, right? We're in the same struggle to try to keep our movement to be aligned tactically towards a strategic orientation that we share without fragmenting to the point of being totally irrelevant and ineffective.
Bingo.
That's it. We're in the same struggle, y'all. And we did it's still debatable how we did in 2024, right? It's debatable how we did. I think we could have been way more fractured than we were. And so I feel some pride, but I do think that folks totally underestimated their level of right relationship with the base. And they thought that because, Beyonce was with the Dems, that all of a sudden, everything was going to be okay, or that because Black people were going to show up, that everything was going to be okay. And we saw that equation alone doesn't work anymore.
Right. They also made the mistake of thinking that for some reason in this election, if you just said reproductive rights, white women would vote for the Democratic
That's right.
Party. It's like they don't vote for the Democratic Party. I mean, there's some white women and there are, there's a group that we can identify about young and usually quote unquote unmarried or unattached that we can predict will vote for the Democratic Party. Now, there is a concern I think that we have, which is like, and I want to voice it, we are not putting our kind of focus or our hopes in the Democratic Party, but we also understand the Democratic Party as a wall between fascism and what might be possible, right? And so I have worried that in fact we have too often allowed for example, the hope of a generational change among white people, of if we could mobilize young white voters. I try to tell people, look at the data in 2012, young white voters, the majority voted for Romney over Obama. Right. Like, let's be real about that. The same way we have to be real about white women in terms of who we're trying to mobilize and how we do that mobilization. It cannot happen. I don't know if is this the question we're even answering anymore, but it can't happen like around election. I'm a big believer, as Ash just said, of embedding people in community, organizing over a long time. And then as one ask, it's about kind of who they're going to vote for. That's the small ask, because in fact, we know that doesn't turn people's kind of, doesn't move us really towards liberation. It does allow us to exist so that we can mobilize, right? I also think we have to talk about what does coalition and radical solidarity look like? And that may not be in the electoral arena, but to see 40% of Latinx men vote for a Trump, right? To see, I would argue, significant numbers of Black men at least articulate the possibility, and in some case vote for Trump, right? We have to be thinking about what is our engagement, what does kind of radical solidarity look like? How are we mobilizing people? I'm going to throw one more thing out that people hate when I say this, but I think we also have to think strategically about what are we, as I would call it, the white question, right? There's a whole big group of white people, and we have to figure out, are we trying to organize them at least electorally? Are we just not messing with them? Which I think actually is a mistake. Or who is our base? Now I know Black people, but who else is the base in terms of electoral strategies that look different than movement strategies, and being able to differentiate those in terms of what we're trying to build and what's necessary at any one moment. So I'll
100%. And
Yeah.
we gotta be honest, which Black people? Like I'm
thank you.
seeing Amina's message in the chat. It's like, yeah, like if I said like, yo, like I'm actually really I really do not believe that we have democracy if Black sex workers are not involved in governance. Some Black folks would fold, right? So I mean, we have to be real about that, you know. And I say this with all the love for our people that I have in my every little bit of DNA in me, is that we also can be really sensitive,
Mm,
and expect that like folks have to be coming into our movement totally perfectly politicized, to actually be able to do meaningful work. And if they don't, then we experience it as harm and violence when really we're just uncomfortable.
yeah.
And and I think like that's just not good for organizing regular ass people that don't sit and read Audre Lorde all day. And you know, not that we shouldn't all be able to do that, but we that's not where we're at yet. And we haven't created structures for people to be able to live that life, right? So I just think you know, voting, y'all, you know, again, I agree with Dr. Cohen. I think that voting is a means to an end, right? And I say that because again, I imagine that because it's a BFF call that many of y'all are down for defund, right? We want to defund the police. I dig it. I'm with it too. I want to defund the police. Y'all know that's a budget demand. Guess who controls the budget for policing? In your city, in your county, in your state, and in the federal government, they are people who are elected or who are appointed by elected officials. So if you don't control them, then you don't control the budget, right? It's basic math, y'all. Like I'm not even trying to be like a political scientist. It's just basic like power mapping. You know what I'm saying? If you want to make a demand about workers' bill of rights, and unions being able to have dues check. Guess what? The people that decide that, elected and appointed. You want to talk about zoning and stopping gentrification where you live, housing ordinances. All of those are currently, and this doesn't have to be what it is forever. You know, I'm down for a people's movement assembly, but guess what, y'all? We haven't built that to scale. Right.
Yes.
So in the world that is, not in my prefigurative utopian ass vision, we have a government that controls a lot of those things. And for us to be able to choose who those people are to represent us and be in accountable relationship with us requires that we vote. And the reality about 2024, y'all, is that the vast majority of people didn't vote for anybody.
That's right.
Right? Regardless of if your base is Black people or white people or both, or a mix of the rainbow coalition, right? The T is that people are currently really frustrated with all of the options, which creates an incredible opportunity for us.
Okay, we got to be careful though, right? Because I hear people. Okay, poor Paris is trying to get us. I know.
I was not.
Question.
Oh,
Yeah,
no,
what I'm
jump in,
going to
go
say
ahead.
is So the data, because that's what I do, right? The data always says that the majority of people want a third party. So people are like, why don't we have a viable third party? The problem is the majority of people want different third parties,
That's
right?
right.
That's right. So it's not like everybody wants the same third
No,
party.
that's right.
But that's all right. That's all right.
Yeah.
It's a place to mobilize from. It's a place to begin to think and strategize and have an analysis. And what is the intervention? And I agree with you when you say kind of the significance of the electoral arena. I don't want to overstate it, right? I don't think it's going to transform people's lives, but I think it changes, if we go back to your question, Pear, the political conditions under which we can mobilize, right? It is very different trying to build movement under Trump than even Biden, right? And we got to take that seriously next time in terms of the ways in which we get involved in thinking about electoral politics. It is about changing the political conditions under which we can do real liberatory work, not to understand electoral victories as necessary liberatory work.
Absolutely. So I want to open it up to folks for questions, but I do have this question that I want to put together because we're talking about it, and I didn't think that we were gonna. I mean, we should talk about this because, but you also made it really clear we do not believe elections are the liberation. That is not the revolution that we're talking about. In fact, I would say a question that I have is, Black folks were told that we should, democracy, believe in it, and I want to know, and Cathy, based on your research, what do Black people want from democracy? And in particular, we're in this moment where Black women are saying we're the 92%, we count us out, we did our thing, catch us, catch us later. And also the atmosphere that it feels like to me, I was sharing with you, Ash, that it really does feel like the world is waiting for Black folks, which means Black women, to kick it off. Like, where's the revolution? We're not getting started till we, it's not real till Black women lead it. And
Right.
so I'm curious around that. What are Black people saying they want from democracy? Have we been asked enough around that?
Yeah. We,
What do y'all think around this 92%
yeah.
conversation?
Yeah.
Yes, and then with that, I'd like to get some questions from our folks who are joining us.
Yeah. And I can be brief here, which is to say, there is little faith, not a lot of faith, in the things that, in fact, are markers of democracy. So if you ask Black people, do you feel like a full and equal citizen in this country? There's a 30 percentage point difference between white people and Black people. If you ask young Black people, do you believe in the Constitution? There's a 30-point difference in terms of no, I don't believe. If you ask people, do you think the police treat Black people and white people fairly? Everybody says, no, of course not, right? There is a reality to the limits of democracy. And I would say, I would go even further. I wrote this piece that is called Democracy and Death, which is like, how do you have a functioning democracy when we see the state killing Black people, day after day, week after week, year after year? So what does it mean about the limits of democracy, right? So yes, is democracy a system that should allow at some level people to have some relative voice, right? It is not like a system where, in fact, we all vote and decide. We have the Electoral College to make sure that doesn't exist, right? Um, but it does allow us, as Ash pointed to elect some representatives to whom we can be in community and conversation and hold accountable, hopefully, right? I don't want people ever to believe. So democracy is better than fascism. It's better than authoritarianism. It's better than totalitarianism. All the things we are facing at this moment. So I don't want to discount, but most people's concern is about, they're like, well, we have no guardrails. Trump doesn't listen to the courts. So let's say Trump does begin to listen to the courts, but Black people continue to be killed. We can't say that democracy is functioning or it is the system that we aspire to. We are trying again to use a democratic system because it might provide us some of the better political conditions to do the liberatory freedom work that we want to do. And that's not coming through electoral politics, right? right? Democracy is really about a kind of system of governance. It is not, and a liberal democracy focuses on, the individual rights, representative democracy. So all of this is to say, Black people are clear about the limits of democracy. We have lived in a democratic system where, in fact, there was Jim Crow, right? Where is mass incarceration? So we know that our freedom is not attached to democracy. But we also know that if that's the system at hand, we have to fight to make sure, in fact, we have our voices, our vote, and our ability to shape the kind of futures that we want through a movement space. All right.
Do you want to respond to the 92%?
Oh yeah, Cathy, do you want to hit that first?
So you know what I'm talking about, right?
You go first, Ash, and then.
All right. So quickly before I address the 92% phenomenon, Charlene, let's start with democracy. So, and I need to audit a Cathy Cohen class to get sharper about democracy. But I promise I'll never lie to you. And this is what I've read about democracy. What I've read is that there are multiple kinds of democracy, number one. Number two is that there are some consistent threads across democratic political systems. And I'm gonna drop after I read this to you, I'm gonna drop an article in the chat that I'm quoting from. So, actually, even before I give you that definition, let's just start. I just want to reiterate something Cathy said earlier about democracy. It's like, if you're like, fuck democracy, you're not alone. 2/3 of Americans, I would say folks that live in the US, don't think democracy works well already. So you're not like, you're not unique, right? The majority, 2/3 of the folks that live in this country also don't think it works well. And satisfaction, that was from 2024, right? That was before 2025. So you can imagine how people feel now, right? And the satisfaction rate with democracy itself has fallen by 10 points since 2021. That's a lot, right? So you're not by yourself. I would also, so now I'm going to tell you what democracy means, and then I'm going to tell you what I think about that as I transition to the 92% thing. So I told you there's not one in the same way there's not one definition that everybody rocks with around fascism. There's not just one kind of democracy. And across the different forms of democratic political systems, the characteristics that they tend to have in common are three things. One is the potential for all citizens to participate in decision-making through mechanisms like elections or referenda, right? Now, again, most of us would have some ick about that because we would want democracy to be regardless of citizenship, right? Right? So already we might have some ick about it, right? And already that is better than authoritarianism and fascism, right? Both things are true, contradictory, but both are true. The second characteristic is that the idea is like this idea that all people, including rich and powerful people, powerful in air quotes, I would say powerful meaning like access and ability to set and achieve agendas, right? That those folks are accountable before the law, right? Now, we've already seen the Supreme Court. It's so funny to see Justice Roberts all of a sudden have a fucking backbone with Donald Trump, considering he's the one that said that the dude is a fucking king and can get away with whatever he wants to do, right? So that's strike two against our democracy, right? And then three is that there's like well-defined, fundamental, basic, like at birth rights, like free speech, like freedom of assembly, right? And we're already seeing those under attack, right? So, and when those three characteristics are actually achieved across the different democratic political systems and structures, there are benefits, right? People tend to be happier. People have better health. There are more human and civil rights. There are stronger relationships. There's less war, more peace. There's stronger, more egalitarian economies, supposedly, and better governance. Now, why I say this with a little bit of sarcasm is that I do believe that it is not impossible to see a healthy, functioning democracy where all of that is true. The flip side of that coin in the United States is that white people lie. And they've been lying to us for a very long time about how democratic this country is. And it's not. It's just actually not. It's just actually not. So our frustrations with democracy actually are in the absence of democracy. And so when we get into this tizzy about like, should Black people fight for democracy? I'm like, well, I get that we have critique of it. Most of us have never really gotten to practice it. Many of us have never gotten to feel the full benefits of it in the first place. So I can't tell you what it's like to live in a healthy and functioning democracy. And I'm not just talking about the government, I'm also talking about movement governance and how we act in our own communities, right? Like there are times where even what we say is democratic governance has actually just been the same old representative nonsense, and barely that, right? So do I think there are contradictions? Plentiful. And I would caution us to be intentional about building and defining for ourselves. I'm down for that. What actually we would want beyond democracy. And what I would tell you, if I go back to my neighborhood and I bring them something that we create, they're going to be like, prove it. And if we cannot prove it, then the least we can do is fight to keep at least democracy at its best, not at its worst, which is all we've experienced, right? What at its best it could be. And I think if we did that, it could buy us some time to actually get to what we want. Though I think the contradiction is that I don't want a democracy either. I want something better than that. But
Ash,
I can only execute that strategy with the people that we've got right now who can't even win democracy. You know what I mean?
Right. So can I just jump in and say to you and Paris, like it feels like your vision, your beautiful vision of democracy never works unless you deal with racial capitalism, patriarchy, right? Like we can't detach this question of, do Black people like democracy? They would love a democracy
100%.
in a
It
system
worked. That
where
was
there
real.
was racial capitalism and
100%.
patriarchy
100%.
and homophobia and heterosexual.
That's right.
So it is, again, it goes back to a Black feminist framework, which is to say, come on now. All of these systems are intertwined, intersectional, and positions us that way. And so, yeah, democracy now allows us the opportunity to kind of do some thinking together out loud, to be in public, to not to be able to gather together and not believe, in fact, that we're going to be arrested, jailed, deported, disappeared. Um, but it provides us that space so we can think critically about all the systems that exist that are oppressing our people that have to be addressed. Maybe some people would say first and foremost, racial capitalism.
100%.
This is delicious. I love this. I want to get to, well, there's a couple things. I wanted the 92% to come into the conversation because I think it's something that we are holding around this piece around taking action. So I do believe it's important to take action, but we must be strategic. It must make sense, right? It's really, we could be doing a lot of tactics, but it needs to be strategic. And I think right now, people are trying to scramble to make sense around what to do. So, and it can be easy to say, I'm a part of the 92%. And that's just what I'm going to be doing for right now. So I'm wondering if you have anything that to provoke us, to encourage us to be in this moment differently. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel for particularly our cisgen and non-binary fam who and gender nonconforming fam, everybody who is like, I did my part and I'm taking a break. I deeply sympathize and empathize with that, though. I don't know that luxury as a Black queer woman from the working class that lives in the South, and I'm not only a right-wing trifecta state, but a MAGA trifecta state, like the farthest of the right. Like us not resisting looks like not a neutral thing, right? It's not restful. What it looks like for us is them passing laws that say undocumented students can't go to school. What it looks like is the 3 January 6ers that came back to the Chattanooga area building bigger bases than I've got to protect me and my people. So again, if I don't think rest should be a luxury, and like I said earlier, I wish that having a vision was enough. I'd say that as a person who facilitates people to build utopian visions regularly. I love them. I think our people perish for a lack of vision. But even more than that, what my community is saying is like, we got plenty of visions. We don't have enough people that are doing it and getting us to those visions. And so I feel like my way of being accountable to my base is by continuing to not only be non-compliant, but to build the infrastructure that we need to be able to govern ourselves so that we never have to do this shit again, right? And so, I think that. I also think, secondly, that, oh, can I be honest? It's gonna make some people mad. I'm gonna just tell the truth,
Tell
and
the truth.
y'all forgive me. If I didn't know what to do, I'd say I'm not doing anything either, right? And I get it. In this moment, it is a risk. In this movement climate, it can be a risk to lead, right? Because if you lead and you're wrong, people are going to be pissed. If you lead and you're right, people are going to be pissed. If you lead and it's effective, folks are going to be pissed. And if you lead and it's not effective, people are going to be pissed. And it's all going to be your fault. And we've told people that any power is authoritarian, right? And so, which is not true. We've told people that, all hierarchy is bad, which is also not necessarily true. And we've not taught people how to be in the luminal space of contradiction. And particularly in this movement climate, this is the right wing didn't make us do this, right? Philanthropy didn't make us do this to each other, particularly as it impacts Black women's leadership. I can get like not knowing, like, especially if I didn't predict that we were going to be in this in the first place. And now people want me to tell them what to do, being like, yo, I ain't got it. And so instead of just admitting that I really don't know and that I need community to be able to figure out even what to do next, or that I'm tired and I'm scared and I just need a minute, it's easier to say, I did what I was supposed to do. Now y'all do what y'all supposed to do, right? So I think there's probably 10 million reasons for the 10 billion different kinds of Black people that are saying that they're a part of the 92% that isn't going to do anything until other people step up. As for me and my house, we are out in these streets, and we are holding holders, and we are building movements, and that is our ancestral legacy. The last thing I'll say on it is, even if I thought it was strategic, which, frankly, I do not, even though I think if folks need rest, they should take it, right? And trust that the leadership that we need will show up and will be flanked and supported. And when we need to fall out, somebody will let us be the 92% inevitably. I haven't seen it yet, and it's been a couple of decades, but I know it's coming. And if it's not coming, we'll just win and never have to do this shit again. And I can just see you all when it's time to go out for a drink. But what I know for sure is that the absence of our leadership creates a vacuum that is also not neutral, right? Part of how we got here was the absence of our leadership in spaces where it needed to be, right? With our base, with faith communities. Y'all know the majority of Black people live in rural communities now, not in big cities, right? And most of us do not identify as rural organizers or even have connections to our rural roots, right? Right. We've made, we get mad about some of the people that get amplified as movement leadership, but we create the vacuums that they fill. We're too good to go to the churches, and we're too good, or we're too conflict averse to be in spaces where people don't totally politically and emotionally and spiritually align with us. Right. And it creates vacuums that these other folks are willing to fill. These right-wing folks, these grass tops folks, all of that. So it's also, to me, a question. The 92% thing is also a question about, like, how big of a gaping absence are we willing to create that will not stay unfilled because we wanted to check out at a time where people kind of need us the most, right? So again, I'm not fighting with Black people on the internet, and I'm certainly not fighting with people who are not my peer, but I do think that, people should take care of themselves. And that's not a individualistic. I think that's also the thing, part of the failure of democracy is, especially in a US assessment of the political climate of democracy, it's become so individualized. And that's actually, you don't have a democracy without the collective, right? You don't have democracy without the common good. You don't have a fully fledged, healthy democracy without everyone being free and liberated, right? Fannie Lou Hamer said it. I'm not free until everybody's free. So I think for the 92%, what I would encourage is like, okay, if that's what you need, you've made a self-assessment, or you all are a part of a community assessment that has decided this is what you need. Fine. I would ask, what is the strategic consequence and what's your plan for that? In the absence of that, I'll be at work out here with these people not creating the vacuum.
Cathy, your response, and
I,
I'm
I,
looking at
I
the
don't have much to say. I just saw some big thing on the chat and then it went away. But
okay.
I'm just gonna say two quick, very quick things that I do worry about. What it's not 92%, it's not that. It's really building off of some of the stuff Ash said, which is I think this is a moment. And again, I agree. I don't want to say, oh, I know better, or we should be ashamed, or we did this wrong. But it isn't a moment to kind of assess what is our relationship really to the kind of I call them the margins, the working class, the poor in Black communities, the folks that are my family, where I come from, right? And I worry sometimes a couple different things. I worry that um, we have built beautiful movement spaces that serve as political homes for people who have been battered and dismissed in Black community, and that the political home becomes so important that we forget that that's not where we're supposed to be, right? We become a little too insular and comfortable, not because we want to be comfortable, but because we're rarely able to be comfortable. And that comfort becomes enticing instead of thinking about where else do we need to be to build community, to build bases, to build on ramps into our movement. And to Ash's point also, I worry that in fact, I don't want to say, I mean, the kind of silly way of saying it would be, are we scared of Black people? Like, what does it take to organize,
Yes, folks are
to
scared of
go
Black
to
people.
to go
Yes.
to the Jewel and stand in the parking lot? Jewel is the grocery store, sorry. Stand in the parking lot and talk to Black people, right? Like, God forbid. So again, this is not to shame, it is to say, what is our way forward in terms of base building and movement building, right? And how do we reassess both wanting to build spaces where people find comfort and care, which is what we should be doing, but that has to be a place that is transitory, right? Like the political home can't be the objective and the target. The political home is meant to kind of recharge you so we can go out and do our political work. And I think we just have to kind of figure that out a bit more. And I think it's going to be even more difficult in this moment where it is scary as hell out there, right? Like they will snatch your ass up and disappear you. And we got to be serious about that and protecting our people, but we still got to push out and we have to do it as a community and not as individuals. All right, Paris.
So I would love, I mean, we're starting to get some, I'm looking at this question that has come. I'm really interested in some of the questions. We can see some, I would love to have some questions from some of our participants, because the questions that we currently have are from BFF staff. And I think we can be in dialogue about that at another time. And so, not to dismiss it, but we want to give space to some folks who aren't always in the BFF world. So if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box so that I can take a look at those. I would love to conclude this time because we've really zoomed, y'all. I want to do a bit of a recap, but I also would love for y'all to start give people the marching orders. So Ash, we know that you created a resource list that's going to be tagged. Cathy, we'd love to know what you're reading, how you are sharpening yourself. And with the recap, I think what's really clear is that people are Y'all have really uplifted that it is really important that we must find the I in the we. And this is the time to build the we, not romanticize it, but to literally be building this base. We talk about it, and I think we have a whole conversation about why do we think there's the barriers for that? What is the issue with implementation? Why are we getting, what is getting us stuck? Um, and some have said that the whole creation of the nonprofit industrial complex is an issue. I don't feel that as like the 100% issue, but I do think that there are things like there are calls coming from inside the house that we have to answer to, right? I think that we keep saying that the only way that we're going to get through this is by building together. That is truly the way that we're going to be able to build, and that we are clear about who we're building with and what we're building towards. And that there are different opportunities for people to be building in different spaces. And we invite people to be building here at Black Feminist Future. We really do. That it's not just about being involved in the programs to be able to fortify you, but to prepare you to be able to go out into the world, to advance a campaign, to be building in your community, and to really shift what we call the material conditions. And right now, it can feel really daunting when we start doing these power maps. What can I shift? What do we have the power to shift? Where do we have the buy-in? But I think, again, we can make it past these 4 years, but it would be amazing if we were building a mighty mass that we could actually, and a vision that allows us to really put into place what we really want. And I think that's what, I mean, we have to really, we really have to do that. There's some serious work to be done. There's serious work to do some blocking and building. So what are y'all reading? I'm gonna look at some of these questions while y'all are, and I think y'all can see the Q&A box too, if there's some questions that you wanna respond to. If we could, Epiphany, be willing to drop the link to Ash's recommendations. Ash has about 7 links of resources that have been so incredible. Once you made the recommendation, Ash, to listen to Rachel Maddow's Ultra podcast, I was sold and learned so much about the Nazi Party in the 1900s here in the United States, and just what an incredible, just there's so much. What is fascism? There's a whole series that the Highlander Center has created, that Ajeris Dixon is doing around the not the Ajeris, but the Fascism Barometer Project. There is more information to go deeper about what are these terms, what do they mean. So we'll drop a link and make sure that all participants have a link to your resources. Cathy, what are you reading and thinking that can be really helpful to prepare people as they continue to hone themselves for this moment?
Yeah, there are a number. First of all, I want to say to Regina Freer, who sent me a text, yes, I will stand out in the jewel and talk to Black people. She like, you ain't standing out there. Yes, I will. And I'm gonna take you with me. Anyway, so I tried to write, there are a couple things in particular. There's the Black Anti-Fascist Tradition book, Fighting Back from Anti-Lynching to Abolition by Hope and Mullen. I just started this book because I'm trying to kind of get my head around what do we mean by kind of anti-fascist struggle. Their take is to think about as most struggle that has kind of anti-Blackness at its center as an anti-fascist part of the anti-fascist tradition, understanding anti-Blackism, anti-Blackness as part of fascism. So that's one. Um, I am not uh, a reader of fiction, right? Like I like, give me the history. But I'm gonna read Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower, right? Because it's speculative fiction. Everyone is like, you can't really think about this moment unless you're reading that also, or you've read that. So I'm gonna do that. I am also revisiting kind of classic Black feminist texts. Just looked at Kambahi again to think about kind of how do we move in this moment. And then 2 other really quick things. I've been trying to pay attention, believe it or not, again, to poetry just for my soul. So almost daily, I read Litany for Survival. And then I read Lucille Clifton's Won't you come celebrate with me. So those are just a few. I can give you more, but I'll let Ash list theirs.
Yeah, I mean, y'all are gonna get just sort of what I brain dumped on Paris in preparation for this conversation. I cannot speak more highly of the Black anti-fascist tradition. I agree with that. That was not on my list, so thank you for checking me on that. It's righteous that folks should read it, and you know, don't go on Amazon and get it. Get it from Haymarket. Get it from your local indie bookstore. Please and thank you. And you know, for folks, for my folks that are like, one, I'm too busy to read, or I'm too overstimulated to read right now, I feel you. It's why I've been giving out podcasts and stuff that you can get in chunks at your leisure. And Paris already sort of sped through them, but I will say, for all of my critiques of Rachel Maddow, even A Broken Clock is right twice a day, and the Ultra podcast is incredible. So please, if you don't read the book, at least listen to the podcast. It's so informative, not just so that you know that this has happened before over and over and over again in the experiment that is the United States, but also that people resisted, and how they resisted sometimes was really fucking cool.
Yeah.
I'm talking like ads in the New York Times being like, that is a Nazi. Do not support them. Like bold, audacious interventions that should inspire us to be non-compliant. Would offer that the fascism barometer is like a right now clock of where we are in the fascist playbook, with some of the smartest researchers, smartest folks the smartest organizers, smartest activists, smartest trainers and political educators that I know. I trust Ajaris Dixon with my life. And frankly, Ajaris was out ahead of the crowd saying that fascism was coming as early as like the 2010s, when people were saying that we were just being, you know, we were canaries in a coal mine, but they were saying that we were being exaggeratory, that we were being hyperbolic, and look at where we are. So there'll be other resources in that list, but I would start there. And again, as Paris said, we did a Fascism 101 series that was like 7 webinars. We started with just defining fascism, the multiple definitions of fascism. We particularly, Ajaris and I, pushed really hard on what the Black feminist approach to defining feminism ought to be, and not just what the mostly white academic sort of traditional definition of fascism, particularly in a U.S. context, would be. And then went through like how it's approaching domestically, what the global trend is, because y'all know, and I think some folks have iterated in the chat that it is a global phenomenon what is happening right now, and frankly, they've always tried to make it so. And then we talked about, you know, what to do with the white folks, to Cathy's point, and what should we do about all of it now that we found love? What are we gonna do with it? And you know, because we don't do political education just for the sake of being smarter people. We do it to inform strategy so we can execute a plan. And that's my hope as you go through the Fascism 101 series, that it informs your praxis, your practice. So that's a few of the things that I'm obsessed with. But what I would offer too, that I think is just equally as important as the things that I'm reading and listening to for study, is like the wisdom that comes from cultural organizers that came before us, right? So I think to the poetry, I would add like anything written or sung by Bernice Johnson Reagan is in rotation right now. You know, I'm thinking about all the access to the speeches of our elders and ancestors who in their time not only thought that they might be living in a revolutionary moment, but also that they were actually fighting fascism and authoritarianism and apartheid, right? All of those things are bringing me comfort and inspiration, and charging my, you know, fuck it up batteries.
We come from incredible stuff, and there's a lot that we can lean on. And a part of that, both of you are continuing that legacy. So I am so honored that you have been in conversation with me today. Cathy was concerned that it was gonna, like, why? This is so long. I was like, we're gonna blow past this time because there's so much to discuss. I am really encouraged because I hope that each one of you hear that Black feminist, yes, it's a noun, it's an identity, but it is an action, it's a verb, it is a calling into and a calling into being. And the being is to be in service to our people and to the collective liberation of our people. And we must understand what the time, on the clock, and it's shifting, yet we must remain true to our commitments. One, that we must hone ourselves, become sharper. Two, that we must be about the business of doing something together, that we must be in collective doing together. And three, we have to keep showing up. We have to really keep showing up, even when it's hard. As those of us who are committed to continuing the Black radical tradition, of course, you take breaks along the way, of course, right? And this is making our lives are a commitment to liberation and to be in struggle. So, to each one of you, thank you, Cathy. Thank you, Ash. Deep appreciation. To those of you who are tuning in with us, yes, the recording will be available. If you signed up, you will get a list of the resources and some of these questions that have come up. I'm excited to engage with later with the BFF team and with some other folks who may have left their name, just to keep the conversation going. I am so glad that y'all tuned in for HONE, Black Feminist Political Education Series. Take care wherever you are, and let us continue to be in love and struggle. Have a good evening.